Have you ever experienced a moment that felt more like a takedown than a tribute? That's exactly what happened at a high-profile event intended to celebrate hip-hop's enduring legacy. Viewers expected a polished broadcast, a few performances, a thoughtful panel, and some lavish tributes to rap's influence on pop culture. Instead, they witnessed Eminem and 50 Cent deliver a piercing attack on the Recording Academy, live on stage in front of millions. For as long as the Grammys have existed, rumors circulated about bias, especially where hip-hop was concerned. Fans, artists, and industry insiders alike have often questioned how award recipients are chosen. Why were artists like Nas, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac consistently snubbed despite massive influence? How could DMX, who had two back-to-back chart-dominating albums, walk away with 0 Grammys? The whispers grew over the years, but the ceremony continued as if nothing was wrong. Eminem and 50 Cent had each seen massive success and felt the sting of getting overlooked. So on this particular night, they decided enough was enough. As soon as they stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere changed. Eminem held a folded sheet of paper in his hand and addressed the crowd without a shred of small talk, calling this paper a list of every artist who should have won versus every artist who actually won. That alone caused murmurs, but 50 Cent raised the stakes by sharing a personal story, losing Best New Artist to Evanescence in 2004, at the height of his explosive debut when Get Rich or Die Tryin' was everywhere. He recalled realizing in that moment something wasn't just off, it was rigged. The audience squirmed as they sensed this wasn't some planned banter. Producers behind the scenes likely scrambled for any way to rein them in, but neither Eminem nor 50 Cent was about to back down. Eminem then began naming names. DMX's snubs, Nas's decades-long wait for recognition, Snoop Dogg never having a single Grammy despite his colossal imprint on the genre. Each omission was like a dagger aimed at the notion that the Grammys simply honor the best. And then just when people thought the tension couldn't escalate, Eminem flipped his paper to reveal a second list, those who had consistently won year after year. While so many hip-hop pioneers watched from the sidelines, one name that inevitably surfaced was Jay-Z. Eminem acknowledged that Jay-Z had boycotted the Grammys years ago, but also pointed out that eventually Jay seemed to figure out how to thrive within the system, racking up trophy after trophy. Mentioning Beyoncé in the same breath sparked more shock. Although both Jay-Z and Beyoncé are acclaimed for their talent, Eminem suggested there was more at play than raw artistic merit, namely a willingness to abide by industry expectations. 50 Cent then pointed out that Blue Ivy already had a Grammy credit before certain rap titans had ever been recognized. The crowd went dead silent. Nobody expected them to go there, but they did. Social media exploded within minutes. Some applauded Eminem and 50 Cent, declaring them the only rappers brave enough to expose the big lie. Others argued that directly calling out Jay-Z and Beyoncé was out of line, accusing them of attacking fellow artists. But one thing was certain, the cat was out of the bag. There would be no returning to polite tributes after this. The Grammys responded with a routine statement about how they've honored hip-hop before, naming a few recent winners in the rap categories. Fans, however, pointed to glaring contradictions in the Academy's track record, recalling how the Weeknd's smash hits went ignored for the biggest categories, or how Macklemore's award over Kendrick Lamar caused an uproar. The statement rang hollow. Reports indicated that Jay-Z and Beyoncé, not present on that stage, were stunned by how personally they'd been named. Some recalled that Jay-Z once openly criticized the Grammys for sidelining hip-hop. Now he found himself accused of benefiting from the very system he once denounced. Beyoncé, known for her composed demeanor, apparently chose not to respond publicly. Yet for many, this wasn't about personal attacks on particular stars. It was about a broken awards structure. Meanwhile, the conversation spread like wildfire. People began discussing how the Grammys treat rap and hip-hop as second-tier categories, urban music as it was often called, while rarely giving those artists the same spotlight as mainstream, pop or rock. The friction only grows when massive commercial and cultural successes fail to translate into major trophy wins, fueling the belief that the Recording Academy has a narrow view of what excellence looks like. Eminem, in his final remarks, made it crystal clear they weren't pleading for trophies. He said, "We don't need your awards, we made history without you." 50 Cent added that the system thrives on artists' performances, record sales, and public spectacle, but the moment it's time to hand out top accolades, certain acts are shuffled aside. In a single broadcast, they transformed a subdued tribute into a pointed call-out session. The audience, stunned, could do little more than watch them exit the stage. From there, social media turned into a war zone of opinions. Many fans felt vindicated, finally seeing top-tier rappers vocalize what they'd suspected for years. Some critics faulted Eminem and 50 Cent for making it personal by naming Jay-Z and Beyoncé, suggesting that took away from their broader point. Yet that approach likely drew far more attention to the alleged Grammy biases than a vague condemnation ever would. The backlash and applause didn't end with the broadcast. Entertainment outlets spent days dissecting the moment. People dug up old controversies like when Nicki Minaj never won a Grammy despite her decade-long reign, or when Macklemore infamously beat Kendrick Lamar, prompting even Macklemore to apologize publicly. Fans pointed out patterns, how the Grammys often acknowledge hip-hop only in rap categories while relegating actual Best Album or Best Record honors to more traditional pop acts. Eminem and 50 Cent's pointed remarks forced everyone to confront those patterns head-on. Behind the scenes, insiders talked about whether the Recording Academy might finally consider genuine reforms. Perhaps they'd broaden the voting committee or add new checks to ensure a more equitable process. Yet others were skeptical, pointing out that any real change would mean dismantling the structures that maintain the Grammys' power. Why would the establishment want to upend a system from which they've profited for so long? Artists beyond Eminem and 50 Cent began chiming in. Some older hip-hop legends privately thanked them for voicing a concern that's plagued the community for decades. Underground and indie artists saw it as a wake-up call, reminding them that mainstream recognition doesn't always hinge on actual talent or cultural impact. Even fans with no real ties to rap started questioning the validity of the Grammys in general. Could they still be considered the ultimate metric of musical excellence if they ignored major voices in entire genres? Eminem's final words continued to resonate. "We made history without you." Implicit in that statement was a challenge to fans and artists. Do these awards really define an artist's legacy, or has the legacy already been solidified by cultural influence, sales, and the hearts of fans? Even if the Grammys eventually change or pretend to, this question lingers. Some watchers argued the prestige of a Grammy might be forever tarnished by these revelations, while others noted that the ceremony has weathered controversies before and retained its allure. In the immediate aftermath, the Grammys attempted to regroup, insisting on their inclusive track record and promising that they value diversity. But the list Eminem held up was as damning as any statistic. When an icon like Nas spends almost 3 decades without major Grammy recognition, or DMX breaks sales records yet goes unacknowledged in key categories, it's difficult to argue everything is fair and balanced. There's also the question of how newer stars like The Weeknd can get 0 nominations for an album that defined a year of pop culture. Some supporters of the Grammy said hip-hop has in fact won numerous awards, pointing to acts like Outkast or Kanye West. Detractors, however, contended that if you scratch beneath the surface, you see repeated instances of awarding a safe or industry-friendly choice over the rawest talents. They also highlighted how awarding rap categories alone doesn't erase the fact that top-tier categories, Album of the Year, Song of the Year, or Record of the Year, often go to more mainstream artists, leaving rap's biggest achievements overshadowed. Shockwaves from this on-air exposé will likely reverberate for years. Fans and commentators began asking if there's room for alternative recognition platforms more aligned with hip-hop values. Could a new awards program, like the BET Awards or others that emphasize rap and R&B, gain enough mainstream traction to rival the Grammys? It's hard to say given the Grammys' historical prestige and branding as music's biggest night. Yet, one thing is certain. No one will forget the moment Eminem and 50 Cent effectively hijacked a tribute program to blow the lid off what they see as a rigged game. Even for those who disagree with their approach, the facts they presented are tough to ignore. The tension in that auditorium was palpable, and the immediate social media frenzy indicates that a lot of viewers were already primed to hear these truths. When asked for comment, many other musicians offered careful statements, some praising Eminem and 50 Cent for their courage, others trying not to get caught in the crossfire. The industry thrives on relationships, and speaking out about institutional problems can burn valuable bridges. This reality may be why some of hip-hop's biggest names kept their criticisms quieter in the past. It takes a certain level of star power and willingness to endure the fallout to speak this openly against the Grammys. As the days turned into weeks, entertainment programs continued dissecting the legacy of snubs, from classic stories of how rap was once relegated to off-air categories to modern examples of the Academy's perplexing decisions. the conversation, drifted into broader social commentary about how institutions resist acknowledging certain cultural forces unless they fit a sanitized mold. Many concluded that even if the Grammys make nominal changes, the deep-rooted biases might remain unless there's a fundamental shift in who holds the power. Eminem and 50 Cent made their point clear. They aren't waiting for that shift. They built their careers outside the Grammy spotlight and asserted that the real measure of an artist's impact comes from the streets, the fans, and the culture at large, not from a golden trophy. Both have historically sold millions and influenced entire generations without consistent validation from the Academy. In closing, 50 Cent reminded everyone that awarding an artist like him or DMX doesn't just recognize talent, it validates a whole segment of hip-hop culture. By refusing that recognition, the Grammys send the message that certain styles or personas aren't Grammy material. That's why their televised confrontation felt so electric. It wasn't just a rant, it was a reckoning. By reading off a list of names and controversies, Eminem and 50 Cent forced viewers to confront a question. If the Grammys ignore the artists who define an era, then what do they really represent? For many, the final answer might be not much. Now, the legacy of that night continues to unfold. Will future awards see a course correction, or will the same patterns persist? Perhaps the more important outcome is that artists and fans alike are rethinking the value of Grammy recognition. People are now more likely to judge an artist's legacy by cultural impact, influence, and longevity rather than the size of their trophy shelf. That shift in mindset, already fueled by streaming, social media, and the democratization of music, only grows stronger with such public takedowns. In the end, Eminem and 50 Cent walked off that stage looking as if they'd just relieved themselves of a heavy burden. Their parting words, "We don't need your awards," echoed in the stunned silence. The Grammys may continue handing statues to the same safe picks, but they can no longer pretend everyone buys into the facade. Millions watched as two of hip-hop's most influential figures brought a decades-old suspicion into the light, and now even casual fans can't unsee the evidence. It's possible the Recording Academy might adapt just enough to quell future blowouts, but the core issues remain. When an institution prides itself on determining who's best in music, ignoring an entire swath of historically groundbreaking artists is bound to spark rebellion. Eminem and 50 Cent delivered that rebellion in real time, on live television, with no chance for censors to cover it up. So was it a moment of overdue honesty or a messy public fight that risked alienating powerful industry figures? Maybe it was both, but either way, it marked a turning point in the music landscape, an inescapable reminder that the people who create history don't always need golden statues to validate their power. Those who want to keep ignoring hip-hop's rightful place in the pantheon will have a harder time doing so now that the truth has been so bluntly laid bare. And there you have it, a single broadcast that rattled the music world, forcing all of us to question how much faith we really place in the gilded facade of award shows. The next time you see a Grammy handed out, you might recall Eminem, 50 Cent, and that sheet of paper listing the artists the industry tried to overlook, and you might wonder, who truly decides which legacies matter?